My wife runs this house now.
Then when did I sign it over?
The fork had barely touched my plate when Derrick leaned back and said the words I never imagined hearing in the house his father and I had spent 32 years paying for. Mom, you need to understand something. Brianna runs this house now. Across the table, my daughter-in-law gave me a small, satisfied smile. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I simply set my fork down and looked at my son. If Brianna runs this house now, Derrick, when exactly did I sign it over to either one of you? His smile vanished. Then Brianna slowly turned toward him, and that was when I knew there was something they had never intended for me to discover. Before I tell you what happened next, if you've ever felt pushed aside by the very family you sacrificed for, tell me in the comments what you would have said in my place. And if stories about family betrayal and finding the courage to stand up for yourself mean something to you, please like and subscribe. I think you'll want to hear how this one ended. 4 years before Derrick told me that his wife ran my house, I stood in the same dining room surrounded by people dressed in black, wondering how a home could be full of voices and still feel completely empty. My husband, Nathan Thompson, had been buried that morning. We had been married for 43 years. 43 years of grocery lists, stuck to the refrigerator arguments over thermostat settings, Sunday mornings with coffee on the porch. Christmas decorations, Nathan insisted on hanging himself even after his knees started bothering him, and ordinary evenings I had never understood were precious until there were no more of them. Nathan had been 71. A civil engineer for most of his working life, he believed almost everything could be fixed if you measured carefully enough and didn't rush. A crooked porch step, a leaking gutter, a strained budget, even an argument. Slow down, he used to tell me. Most mistakes happen because somebody gets scared and moves too fast. Our house in Richmond, Virginia was probably the best example of that philosophy. We bought it when Derrick was 7. Back then, it was an aging 2-story brick house with faded shutters, an overgrown backyard, and a porch that leaned slightly to the left. The kitchen cabinets were ugly. The upstairs bathroom pipes rattled, and the previous owner had covered beautiful hardwood floors with brown carpet. But Nathan stood in the front yard with his hands on his hips and saw something I couldn't. "This is the one," he said. I laughed. "The one that's going to bankrupt us." He grinned. "The one we're going to grow old in." He was right. We didn't have much money then. Nathan was building his career, and I was working my way up at a community bank, eventually becoming a senior mortgage underwriter. I spent my days reviewing other people's income debts, property records, titles, and loan documents, then came home and helped Nathan figure out whether we could afford a new water heater. Every improvement happened slowly. Nathan repaired the porch himself one summer. He built bookcases along the living room wall because I complained that my novels were stacked everywhere. He turned half the garage into a workshop where he could disappear for hours with a radio, a cup of coffee, and some project nobody had asked him to start. The mortgage took decades to pay off. I still remember the evening we made the final payment. Nathan opened a cheap bottle of sparkling wine and poured it into our good anniversary glasses. "To being boring and debt-free," he said. I laughed so hard I nearly spilled mine. That house wasn't simply worth whatever number a realtor might attach to it. It held our life. That was why losing Nathan made every room feel different. His chair was still beside the window. His work boots remained in the garage. For months I couldn't bring myself to move his blue coffee mug from the cabinet. Sometimes grief isn't dramatic. Sometimes it's reaching automatically for 2 plates instead of 1. Sometimes it's waking at 2 in the morning because the other side of the bed is too quiet. Derrick understood that, or at least I believed he did. After the funeral, he started coming by more often. At first I was grateful. He would arrive Saturday mornings wearing old jeans and carrying a toolbox. "What's broken this week?" he'd ask. "Nothing." "Then I'll find something." He cleaned the gutters, replaced a loose handle on the back door, changed the furnace filter before I even remembered it needed changing. When the lawn grew too high, Derrick appeared with his mower. If I needed groceries, he offered to pick them up. If I had an appointment across town, he'd sometimes rearrange his schedule to drive me. Brianna was thoughtful, too. She brought casseroles during those first terrible weeks after Nathan died. She would sit at my kitchen table and ask whether I had eaten. She once opened my refrigerator, frowned at what she saw, and announced Layla coffee creamer and half a lemon are not dinner. Even I laughed at that. And then there was Zoe. My granddaughter was 8 when Nathan died. She had loved her grandfather fiercely. Nathan used to let her sit on a stool in his workshop while he showed her how to sand wood. After he was gone, she started asking to spend nights with me. We would make pancakes in the morning, usually shaped like something that was supposed to be a heart, but looked more like a potato. Having Zoe in the house helped. Having all of them around helped. For the first year after Nathan's death, I honestly thought I was fortunate. I had watched widows become isolated after losing their husbands. I had seen adult children get busy with their own lives until phone calls became birthdays and holidays. Derrick wasn't doing that. He was there. Maybe that was why I didn't recognize the first change. It was so small. One afternoon, an insurance renewal arrived in the mail. I left it on the kitchen counter while I made tea. When I came back, Derrick had opened the envelope. "I'll take care of this," he said. I remember looking at him. "I can handle my insurance, Derrick." "I know you can." He smiled and kissed my forehead. "I just don't want you worrying about stuff like this anymore." There was nothing cruel in his voice, nothing threatening. It sounded loving. So I let him call the insurance company. Another time he noticed my property tax statement on the desk. "You want me to pay this online for you? I've been paying property taxes since before you could spell property." He laughed. Okay, independent woman." Then he raised both hands in surrender. I laughed too. Those moments didn't frighten me. Why would they? This was my son, the boy who used to climb into my bed during thunderstorms, the teenager Nathan taught to change a tire in our driveway, the man who cried into my shoulder at his father's funeral. So when Derrick started saying, "I'll handle it," Mom, I heard love. When he said, "You don't need to worry about that," I heard protection. When he started checking things without asking, I told myself he was simply trying to fill some of the space his father had left behind. I didn't understand that control rarely walks through the front door announcing itself. Sometimes it carries your groceries. Sometimes it fixes your faucet. Sometimes it tells you to rest while it quietly starts making decisions in your place. There was one evening I remember especially clearly now. Derrick had replaced the porch light. We were sitting outside afterward watching cars pass beneath the old maple trees lining our street. "You know," he said, "Dad always worried about you being here alone." I turned toward him. Nathan worried about everybody. I mean financially, the house, bills, maintenance, all of it. "I spent 30 years reviewing mortgages for a living, Derrick." "I know," he smiled, "but you don't have to prove anything anymore. Let me make things easier." I should have paid attention to the wording, not "let me help." "Let me make things easier." There is a difference, although I didn't understand it then. I touched his hand. "I'm lucky to have you." His expression softened. "You are." Neither of us knew how bitter those words would sound to me later, or maybe only one of us didn't, because within another year Derrick would need something from me, something much bigger than permission to pay an insurance bill. And when he asked, I would remember all those Saturdays he had spent mowing my lawn, every grocery bag he had carried into my kitchen, every time he had made me feel protected after Nathan died. That was what made what happened next so easy. Derrick didn't have to force his way into my home. I opened the door for him. And when he told me his family needed somewhere to stay for just 6 months, I didn't hesitate. I had no idea those 6 months would become the beginning of the fight for the house Nathan and I had spent our entire marriage building. The first time Derrick told me about the investment he made, it sounded like a temporary setback. It was a Tuesday evening almost 18 months after Nathan died. I had just finished washing the dinner dishes when Derrick called and asked if he could stop by. He arrived alone. That was unusual. Normally, if he came after work, Brianna and Zoe were with him, or he stayed only long enough to fix something and leave. That night, he sat at my kitchen table without taking off his jacket. I poured him coffee. "You look like your father when he was about to tell me something expensive had broken." Derrick gave a weak laugh. Maybe I learned from him. Then he stared into his cup. "I made a bad investment, Mom." My stomach tightened. What kind of bad? He explained that he and a business acquaintance had put money into a small residential renovation project outside Richmond. The plan had been simple. Buy an older property, renovate it, sell, it split the profit. Except costs had risen. The renovation had taken longer than expected. The eventual sale had not covered what Derrick had put into it. "How much did you lose?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "Enough that things are tight." That wasn't a number. After 30 years in mortgage underwriting, I knew people avoided numbers when numbers frightened them. "Derrick, we're okay," he said quickly. "We're not bankrupt. Nothing like that." I studied him. "What does Brianna say?" "She knows. We're working through it." He explained that they were considering selling their townhouse. They had equity in it, and eliminating the mortgage would give them room to recover. I hated hearing that, but there was something responsible about the plan. Sell, reduce expenses, rebuild. Nathan would have approved. Then Derrick said we might need somewhere to stay for a little while. That was all it took. He didn't have to ask twice. "You'll stay here, Mom. I have 3 bedrooms sitting empty most of the time. We don't want to impose. "You're my son." He looked relieved, and that relief erased the last hesitation I had. How long? 6 months, maybe less. I reached across the table. Then 6 months. A week later, Brianna came over to discuss the arrangement. She seemed embarrassed. "I hate that we're doing this to you, Layla. You aren't doing anything to me. We'll contribute to groceries and utilities. We'll figure it out. And the second we're back on our feet, we're gone." I smiled. "Your family, not tenants." I would remember saying that later. At the time, it felt generous. Within 3 weeks, their townhouse was sold and a moving truck stopped in front of my house. I gave Derrick and Brianna the guest bedroom upstairs. Zoe took the little sewing room across the hall. The first few weeks were better than I expected. For the first time since Nathan died, I woke to sounds upstairs. Cabinet doors opened in the kitchen. Someone laughed in the hallway. Zoe left her backpack beside the stairs no matter how many times Brianna told her to move it. We ate dinner together most evenings. On Friday nights, Derrick brought home takeout. Sunday mornings, Zoe helped me make pancakes. The house felt alive again. Maybe too alive sometimes, but I preferred that to the silence. The first change Brianna made seemed harmless. "These curtains are so heavy," she said one morning, touching the burgundy drapes in the living room. "Nathan picked those." Brianna smiled. "They're very Nathan." I laughed. That was true. A week later, she came home with lighter curtains. I got them on sale. I hesitated. Then I let her hang them. The room did look brighter. Next came the furniture. Brianna moved an armchair closer to the window. She shifted the coffee table. She replaced 2 old throw pillows with cream-colored ones. I noticed each change, but none seemed important enough to argue about. Brianna was an interior designer. Rearranging rooms was practically how she breathed. Then one afternoon, I came downstairs and stopped halfway into the living room. 3 framed photographs were missing from the bookcase. One showed Nathan and me on our 25th anniversary. Another was Derrick's college graduation. The third was Nathan holding Zoe when she was a baby. Brianna. She appeared from the dining room. "Yeah, where are the pictures?" "Oh, I put them in the cabinet." "Why?" She glanced toward the shelves. It was getting visually crowded. I stared at her. She must have seen something in my face because her tone softened. "Layla, I'm not throwing them away. I just thought the room could breathe a little. That picture of Nathan has been there for 14 years. I know." "Then put it back." There was a pause. Small, but I felt it. Then Brianna smiled. "Of course." She returned the anniversary photograph. "Not the other 2. I noticed." I said nothing. That evening, Derrick found me alone in the kitchen. "Brianna said you got upset." "I wasn't upset. I asked her not to move your father's photograph." She wasn't trying to disrespect Dad. I didn't say she was. She just wants the place to feel fresh. I turned toward him. "Fresh? You know what I mean." "No, I'm not sure I do." Derrick sighed. "Mom, you've kept everything almost exactly the same since Dad died." That hurt because it was partly true. Before I could answer, Brianna walked in. "I don't want you thinking I'm trying to erase Nathan," she said. Her voice was gentle. "I just want this house to feel alive again. Alive." The words stayed with me, as if Nathan's photograph represented death, as if preserving something I loved meant I had stopped living. But I looked at Derrick, then at Brianna, and decided peace mattered more than curtains and picture frames. "All right," I said. "Just ask me first." "Absolutely," Brianna replied. For a while she did. Then the 6-month mark arrived. I knew because I had written their move-in date on my calendar. Derrick said nothing. Neither did Brianna. One evening I heard them discussing replacing the backyard patio the following spring. Another day, Brianna measured the dining room wall and talked about built-in storage. "That's a big project for a temporary stay," I said lightly. She looked at me. "Oh, I don't mean right away." Then she smiled. "We have plenty of time." Something about those words made me uncomfortable. That night I stood in my bedroom looking down at Derrick's car in the driveway. 6 months ago, I had welcomed them because I believed my son needed a place to recover. Now their boxes were unpacked. Their furniture was mixed with mine. Brianna's dishes filled my cabinets. Zoe's school pictures were on the refrigerator, and no one was talking about leaving. I told myself not to be unkind. They were family. They were recovering. Maybe Derrick needed another month, maybe 3. But deep inside, a question had begun to form. When had "until we get back on our feet" become "we have plenty of time"? I didn't know the answer yet. What I did know was that Brianna had stopped behaving like a guest, and soon Derrick would stop treating me like the owner. The strange thing about losing control of your own home is that no one has to announce it. There is no meeting, no document placed in front of you, no moment when everyone sits around the dining table and says, From now on, your opinion matters less. It happens through small decisions. And because each one seems too small to fight over, you keep letting them pass. By the time Derrick and Brianna had been living with me for 9 months, I had started noticing how often I was being informed about things instead of asked. One Saturday morning, I walked downstairs and found 6 people I didn't know sitting around my dining table. Coffee cups covered the surface. Fabric samples were spread across the sideboard Nathan had refinished himself. Brianna was standing near the window discussing a design project with 2 clients. "Oh, good morning, Layla," she said casually. I tightened my robe. I didn't realize we were having company. It was last minute. I needed somewhere quiet to meet them. I looked around. Quiet wasn't the word I would have chosen. You could have told me. Of course, she smiled. Next time. That phrase became surprisingly common. Next time. Next time she'd ask before moving something. Next time she'd tell me people were coming. Next time she'd check before using the dining room. But next time never seemed to arrive. A few weeks later, I came home from grocery shopping and couldn't find the mail. I always left it in a wooden tray beside the kitchen. The tray was empty. Brianna, she was upstairs. "What, have you seen my mail?" A moment later, she appeared at the top of the stairs. I organized it. "You what?" She came down and opened a drawer near the pantry. Inside were several envelopes arranged neatly. One section held utilities. Another held insurance. Another held personal correspondence. I stared at it. "You opened any of this?" No, she sounded offended. "Of course not. Then why is it in a drawer? Because the counter always looks cluttered." I picked up an envelope addressed to me. "It's my mail." "I know. Then leave it where I put it." Brianna's expression tightened for just a second. I was trying to help. That sentence had become a shield in my house. Any objection I made could be turned into ingratitude because everyone was always trying to help me. That evening, Derrick came into the living room while I was reading. "Mom, Brianna said you snapped at her." I lowered my book. I asked her not to move my mail. She was organizing. "Why does my mail need to be organized by your wife?" He sighed. "Why does everything have to become an issue?" I stared at him. That is exactly what I was wondering. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Derrick softened his voice. "You know we're just trying to make things easier for you." There it was again. Easier. A few days later, he brought up the property taxes. We were having coffee when he noticed the county notice on my desk. "You still pay these by check?" "Yes." "Mom, it's 2026. I know what year it is." He laughed. "Give me that. I'll set up the online payment. I can do it. I know you can." He sat across from me. But why bother? That question irritated me more than it should have, because the answer seemed obvious, because it was mine to bother with. Still, I let him help. Then came the homeowner's insurance, then one utility account. Derrick started keeping a list of household expenses on his laptop. I told myself it made sense because 4 people were living under one roof. But the language slowly changed. At first he said, "Want me to handle this?" Later it became, "I'll handle this." Eventually it was, "That's already handled." One afternoon he asked, "What do you think the house is worth now?" I looked up from my crossword puzzle. This house, no Buckingham Palace. I smiled despite myself. "I haven't checked. Probably a lot more than you think." "Why?" He shrugged. "Just curious. Richmond values have gone up. You planning to become a realtor? Maybe I like knowing what things are worth." I went back to my puzzle, but the question stayed with me. A week later, Derrick asked whether Nathan and I had ever put the house into a trust. No. Why not? We discussed it with Monica years ago. At the time we decided against it. Is my name anywhere on the title? That made me stop. I looked directly at him. No. Derrick nodded too quickly. "Okay, why are you asking estate planning?" "My estate planning. You should think about these things. I have thought about them." He smiled. "I'm just looking out for you." I didn't smile back. For the first time, something inside me tightened. Not fear exactly. Instinct. I had spent more than 30 years reviewing mortgage applications. I had learned that people revealed a great deal through the questions they asked. A person worried about monthly payments asked about interest rates. A person worried about inheritance asked about beneficiaries. A person interested in control asked whose name was on the title. I reminded myself this was Derrick, my son. Still, that evening I went upstairs and opened the small fireproof box in my bedroom closet. Inside were Nathan's death certificate, our marriage certificate, insurance documents, my will, and the paperwork connected to the house. I pulled out the deed. There it was, my name, Layla Thompson. After Nathan's estate had been settled, ownership had remained with me, only me. I sat on the edge of the bed, holding that document longer than necessary. Nothing had changed. Derrick had no ownership interest in the house. I had never signed a power of attorney giving him broad authority over my finances. I had never added him to the deed. I had never authorized Brianna to make decisions for me. Legally, everything was clear. Emotionally, however, something had shifted. The next morning, Brianna announced that she had ordered new dining chairs. I looked at her. "You ordered them?" "Yes. The old ones are getting dated. Did you ask me?" She paused. Then Derrick looked up from his coffee. "Mom, they're just chairs." I turned toward him, in whose house his face changed for half a second. Then he smiled. "Yours, obviously." Obviously. That word should have reassured me. Instead, it did the opposite. Because people rarely need to say something is obvious when everyone truly believes it. A few nights later, Derrick walked into the living room carrying a thin blue folder. He sat beside me and placed it on the coffee table. "I've been meaning to take care of some paperwork for you," he said. I looked at the folder. "What paperwork?" "Nothing complicated. Insurance updates, some estate stuff, things that should have been cleaned up after Dad died." He tapped the cover. "I already did most of the work. You just need to sign a few places." I looked from the folder to my son's face. A year earlier, I probably would have thanked him. Instead, I heard myself ask a question. "Who prepared these?" Derrick hesitated. Only for a second. But after 30 years of watching people hesitate across bank desks, I knew exactly how long a second could be. Then he smiled. "Monica helped with it. Monica Reed, my attorney." I nodded slowly. "All right." Derrick pushed the folder toward me. "Great. It'll take 5 minutes." He didn't know it yet, but 5 minutes was about to become much longer. Because Derrick had forgotten something important about his mother. Before grief made me lonely, before retirement made me seem harmless, before he started handling my bills, I had spent decades reading documents people hoped I wouldn't read carefully, and I never signed anything I didn't understand. Derrick left the blue folder on the coffee table and went into the kitchen to get himself another cup of coffee. "Sticky notes show you where to sign," he called over his shoulder. "Most of it's routine." I looked down at the folder. Routine. That word had probably convinced thousands of people to sign things they should have read. I opened it. The first page was exactly what Derrick had promised, an insurance-related authorization form. Nothing alarming. The next document concerned household coverage information. I read every line anyway. When Derrick returned, he stopped beside the couch. "Mom, you don't have to study it like you're approving somebody's mortgage." I looked up. Old habits. He smiled. "I know." I signed the first form, then the second. Derrick relaxed. That interested me. I turned another page. There were several documents behind it, each marked with a yellow tab. Some looked like copies. Others were filled with language most people would skim because it was dense and repetitive. But I had spent more than 30 years reading language exactly like that. Names, legal descriptions, grantor, grantee, consideration, transfer of interest. My fingers stopped. I read the page again, slowly. Derrick sat in Nathan's old chair across from me, scrolling through his phone. I didn't look at him. The document concerned the property on which I was sitting. My property. And the language wasn't about updating insurance. It wasn't about estate planning. It was about transferring an ownership interest. I felt something cold settle beneath my ribs. Derrick. What is this? He glanced up. What? I turned the paper slightly. This page. He stood and walked over. For the briefest moment, I saw recognition in his eyes. Then it disappeared. Oh, that. It's part of the estate paperwork. What part? He sat beside me. Just standard legal language. I looked at him. Transfer of interest is not standard language on an insurance update. He laughed lightly. "You've been retired too long, Mom." I didn't laugh. His smile faded a little. "I mean, Monica put the package together. I told her we wanted everything cleaned up so there wouldn't be problems later. You know what I mean. No, explain it." Derrick exhaled. "If something happens to you, we shouldn't have to spend months sorting out the house, that's all. Something happens to you. I was 69, not 99. I drove myself, managed my money, went to church, met friends for lunch. I wasn't waiting for someone to administer my remains." "Why didn't Monica call me? She knew I was helping you." That answer came quickly, too quickly. I lowered my eyes to the page. A yellow sticky note sat near the signature line. "Sign here." I could feel Derrick watching me, so I did something he didn't expect. I smiled. "You're probably right. I am rusty." His shoulders relaxed. "Exactly. That's why I'm helping." I turned back to the beginning. Then, one page at a time, I signed the documents I understood and agreed with. Insurance authorization, updated contact information, nothing that transferred ownership. When I reached the suspicious document, I lifted 2 pages together as though they were one and slid the transfer page beneath the unsigned papers at my side. Derrick was looking at his phone again. He didn't notice. I finished the legitimate forms. There. I closed the folder. All done as much as I'm doing tonight. He reached for it. I held it for half a second longer. "You're sure Monica prepared this?" His eyes met mine. Yes. That was the moment something broke inside me. Not because I knew what the document meant, because I knew Monica. She had handled our estate planning for years. She had sat with Nathan and me at her conference table while we discussed wills, medical directives, beneficiaries, and what would happen if one of us died first. Monica Reed did not send legal documents through someone's adult child without speaking to her client. Derrick should have known I knew that, but perhaps he no longer saw me as the woman who had spent decades checking signatures and title records. Perhaps he saw his widowed mother, lonely, trusting, manageable. He took the folder upstairs. The transfer page remained beneath a magazine beside me. I waited. I heard a bedroom door close. Then I picked up the document. My hands were trembling. I hated that. I wanted anger. Instead, I felt fear. Not fear of losing the house, not yet. Fear of what asking questions might reveal about my son. I went into my bedroom and closed the door. Then I called Monica. She answered on the 4th ring. "Layla. Everything okay? I need to ask you something." "Of course. Did you prepare paperwork for Derrick's silence?" "What kind of paperwork? Insurance updates? Estate documents?" "No." One word. My stomach dropped. I sat on the edge of the bed. "Did he contact you?" "Not recently." I looked at the paper in my hand. "Monica, I have something here with language about transferring an interest in my house." Her voice changed immediately. "Did you sign it?" "No." "Good. What is it? I can't tell you without seeing it. Take a picture and send it to me." I did. The next 2 minutes felt like 20. Then Monica called back. "Layla, yes, this appears to be part of a property transfer package." I closed my eyes. "Transfer to whom?" "I can't see the full package from one page, but I can tell you this isn't something I prepared." I pressed my free hand against my forehead. "My son told me you did." Another silence. This one felt different, sympathetic. "I think you should come see me tomorrow." "Am I in trouble?" "Not if you haven't signed a deed." "I didn't." "Then don't sign anything else Derrick gives you." I looked toward the bedroom door as if he might somehow hear her. What if he asks about the paperwork? Don't accuse him yet. That surprised me. Why not? Because right now we know he lied about where the documents came from. We don't know exactly what he's trying to accomplish. I swallowed. "I think I know." "No, Layla. You suspect. There's a difference." She was right. Nathan would have said the same thing. "Measure carefully. Don't rush. Bring everything you have tomorrow," Monica said. "We'll check the property records and figure out exactly what this is." After we hung up, I sat in the dark. Downstairs, I could hear Brianna laughing at something on television. Then Derrick's voice. Normal. Relaxed. The sounds of a family living inside my home. I looked at the unsigned document again. For months, I had wondered whether Derrick and Brianna were becoming too comfortable. Now I had a different question. Had my son stopped seeing my house as a place I had generously opened to him? Had he started seeing it as something that already belonged to him? I slipped the page into my purse. The next morning, I would take it to Monica. And for the first time since Derrick moved in, I wasn't going to tell him where I was going. The next morning, I left the house at 9:15 with the unsigned document tucked inside my purse. I told Brianna I was meeting a friend for coffee. It was the first lie I had told anyone in my family in years. I hated how easily it came out. But I hated even more that I suddenly felt I needed to lie in order to protect something that was legally mine. Monica Reed's office was downtown on the 3rd floor of an old brick building overlooking a row of maple trees. Nathan and I had sat in that office many times over the years. Back then, we had always come together. That morning, the empty chair beside me felt enormous. Monica closed her office door. "Show me everything." I placed the page on her desk. She put on her glasses and read it carefully. Then she asked me to tell her exactly what Derrick had said. I repeated the conversation, the blue folder, the insurance forms, the sticky notes, his claim that Monica had prepared the documents. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she leaned back. "I want to check the county records before we assume anything." She turned to her computer. I knew enough about property records to understand what she was looking for. The address appeared first, then the parcel information, then the ownership record. Monica turned the monitor slightly toward me. There was my name, Layla Thompson. Only my name. No recorded transfer, she said. I stared at the screen. Nothing. Nothing. I released a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. So the house is still mine, completely. The relief lasted about 3 seconds. Then another thought replaced it. What was Derrick trying to get me to sign? Monica picked up the page again. Based on the language and formatting, it appears to be part of a quitclaim deed package, probably generated through an online legal document service. My mouth went dry. So if I had signed it, that would depend on the complete document and what happened afterward. A deed generally has additional execution and recording requirements, but the important point is that this was not an insurance form. I looked down at my hands. My own son had put a property transfer document between ordinary paperwork and marked the signature line with a yellow tab. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, I said I want to go home and put that folder in front of him. I understand. I want him to look me in the eye and explain himself. I understand that too. But Monica removed her glasses. But you don't yet know what Derrick believes happened. I frowned. He believes I signed it, possibly. He was sitting right there. Did he inspect every page afterward? No. Did he make a copy in front of you? No, I thought about it. He had taken the folder upstairs almost immediately. Monica folded her hands. Before you accuse anyone, find out what they believe they already have. The sentence stayed in the room between us. You want me to pretend I don't know. I want you to protect yourself first. That distinction mattered. Monica advised me to secure my original property documents and review access to my financial accounts. She also told me not to sign anything Derrick or Brianna presented without independent review. Nothing dramatic, nothing secret agent ridiculous. Just ordinary precautions I should have taken months earlier. I nodded. Then the anger finally came. He's my son. My voice cracked on the last word. Monica's expression softened. I know. I let him into my home because he was struggling. I know. I never asked him for rent. You don't have to defend your generosity to me. I looked away. Maybe I made him think everything I have is eventually his. That still wouldn't give him the right to take it now. I needed to hear that. Because mothers are talented at turning their children's mistakes into evidence of their own failures. I left Monica's office just before noon. On the drive home, I thought about confronting Derrick the moment I walked through the door. Instead, I remembered Nathan. Slow down. Measure carefully. Don't move because you're scared. When I entered the kitchen, Brianna was standing at the counter arranging flowers. How was coffee? She asked. Fine. Good. She smiled. Then she pointed toward the living room. I've been thinking we should replace that old bookcase eventually. Nathan's bookcase, the one he had built himself. I took off my coat. Why, it makes the room feel heavy. Does it a little? She studied me. You okay? I'm fine. And for once I was grateful she believed me. That evening, Derrick came home in a cheerful mood. He kissed Brianna, asked Zoe about school, then opened the refrigerator. Mom, those papers last night should simplify things. I watched him. What things you know? House stuff. He reached for a bottle of water. Insurance, estate planning, future headaches. Future headaches. I almost admired the phrase. So everything is handled. He twisted the cap, pretty much. There was confidence in his voice, not relief. Confidence. That was when I understood Monica's advice. Derrick believed something had changed. He believed the folder had accomplished something, and if I confronted him now, I might never learn what he intended to do next. So I smiled. Good, he smiled back. That smile hurt more than I expected. Over the following days, I listened differently. Brianna stood in the kitchen one morning and said, "When we redo this room, I'd love a bigger island, not if when." Another evening, she told Derrick, once everything is official, we can finally start making real changes. I was sitting 10 feet away. Neither of them lowered their voices. A week earlier, I might have assumed they were talking about their finances. Now I wondered what official meant. Then Brianna walked into Nathan's workshop one Saturday and began measuring the walls. I found her holding a tape measure near his workbench. "What are you doing?" She looked over her shoulder. "Just seeing what we could do with the space." She smiled. "You know what I mean?" I did. That was the problem. For months I had thought Brianna was simply becoming too comfortable. Now I saw something else. She wasn't behaving like a guest who had overstayed her welcome. She was behaving like someone waiting for ownership to catch up with what she already believed, and Derrick was letting her believe it. That night, I went into my bedroom and locked the door. I took the original deed from my fireproof box and placed it beside my purse. The next morning, I would move it somewhere Derrick could never reach without me. I still wasn't ready to confront my son, but something inside me had changed. I was no longer the lonely widow grateful that her family had filled an empty house. I was Layla Thompson. I had worked for decades. I had paid for this home beside my husband. I knew what my signature meant, and if Derrick believed grief had made me too weak to protect it, I was going to let him keep believing that for just a little longer, because now I needed to know how far my own son intended to go. The first thing Brianna removed from Nathan's workshop was his radio. It was an old black tabletop radio with a cracked tuning knob and a strip of silver tape across one corner. Nathan had owned it for so long that Derrick used to joke it should have been listed as a dependent on our tax return. It wasn't valuable, but on Saturday mornings Nathan used to turn it on while he worked, jazz old soul baseball games, whatever he could find. So when I walked into the garage one afternoon and saw that radio sitting inside a cardboard box beside the trash bins, I stopped cold. There were other things in the box: a pair of work gloves, 2 woodworking magazines, a jar filled with screws, Nathan's old measuring tape. I picked up the radio. Brianna. She appeared in the doorway from the kitchen. "Yes, why is this out here?" She glanced at the box. "Oh, I'm clearing some things. From Nathan's workshop. I haven't thrown anything away yet." Yet Brianna sighed. "Layla, that room hasn't been properly used in 4 years. It has been used. For storage. It was Nathan's workshop. I know." She said it with the careful patience people sometimes use when they think they're talking to someone unreasonable. "I just think the space could be functional again." "For what?" She hesitated. "A studio." I stared at her. "My studio," she clarified, "eventually." There was that word again. Eventually. As if the future of my house had already been decided and I was simply being informed in installments. "No." Brianna blinked. "What no?" "You're not turning Nathan's workshop into a studio." Her face changed, not dramatically, just enough. "I wasn't saying tomorrow. I don't care when. It's a room, Layla. No, to you, it's a room." I put the radio against my chest. "To me, it's the place my husband spent 25 years working with his hands." Brianna folded her arms. "And how long is everything supposed to stay frozen exactly as Nathan left it?" The question hit harder than she probably intended. For a second, I couldn't answer. Then I heard another voice. "Mom." Zoe stood behind Brianna. She had apparently heard enough to understand something was wrong. Brianna turned. "Go upstairs, sweetheart." Zoe looked at me, then at the box. "Is that Grandpa's stuff, Zoe?" I said go upstairs. She obeyed, but slowly. Brianna looked back at me. "I didn't mean to upset you. Then stop deciding what I should be ready to lose." I carried the box inside the workshop and closed the door. My hands shook after Brianna left. I hated that too. Anger should make you feel powerful. Mine made me feel old. I sat on Nathan's wooden stool and looked around. Dust covered the workbench. His clamp still hung on the wall. A pencil rested inside a shallow groove near the vise. For 4 years I had barely touched anything. Maybe Brianna was right about one thing. I had preserved too much. But preserving something was not the same as surrendering it. A soft knock came at the door. "Grandma Zoe, come in." She slipped inside and closed the door behind her. "Mom's mad. She'll get over it." Zoe looked toward the cardboard box. "I'm sorry. You didn't do anything. I helped her carry some boxes." I softened immediately. "Sweetheart, you have nothing to apologize for. She said you didn't need this stuff anymore." That sentence hurt. Not because Zoe said it, because I could hear Brianna saying it. Zoe crouched beside another box under the workbench. This one too, I pulled it toward me. It was heavier than I expected. Together we opened it. Inside were things I hadn't seen in years. Photographs, old engineering sketches, receipts Nathan had apparently believed needed to survive until the end of civilization. A notebook filled with measurements, a small wooden airplane he'd started making for Zoe and never finished. Zoe picked it up carefully. "Grandpa made this, he was making it for you." She smiled. "Can we finish it someday?" My throat tightened. Yes. Beneath the notebook was an envelope. My name was written across the front. Layla, Nathan's handwriting. I knew immediately it wasn't some mysterious final message he'd hidden before his death. Nathan wasn't that theatrical. Then I remembered. Years earlier, during one of our anniversary weekends, we had written letters to each other after an argument about retirement. I must have put mine away and forgotten it. I opened the envelope. The letter was several pages long. Most of it made me smile. Nathan teasing me about working too much, promising we'd travel once we retired, complaining that I never let him buy the expensive grill he wanted. Then I reached a paragraph that made me stop. Nathan had written about Derrick. Our son had been going through financial trouble even then, not serious trouble, but enough that I had wanted to give him money. Nathan had disagreed. The line was simple: never surrender your security just because someone you love says they need it. I read it twice, then a third time. Zoe was studying the wooden airplane and didn't notice the tears filling my eyes. Nathan had understood something about me that I had spent years pretending was kindness. I was afraid to say no to Derrick. Not because he was cruel, because I loved him. Whenever he struggled, I wanted to remove the struggle. Whenever he needed something, I wanted to provide it. And after Nathan died, that instinct became stronger. Derrick had filled the silence. He checked on me, helped me, made me feel needed. Somewhere along the way, I had become so afraid of losing that closeness that I stopped correcting him when help became control. That wasn't Derrick's excuse. He was 41 years old. His choices belonged to him. But my silence belonged to me. Grandma, I wiped my cheek. Yes, are you sad a little? Because of Grandpa, I looked around the workshop. Because I forgot something he taught me. What I folded the letter carefully. That loving somebody doesn't mean giving them everything they ask for. Zoe considered that with the seriousness only a 12-year-old could manage. Mom says saying no is healthy. I laughed despite myself. Your mother is absolutely right about that. The irony almost made me laugh again. Zoe helped me put everything back. Before she left, I handed her the unfinished airplane. We'll finish that together. Promise, promise. After she went upstairs, I stayed in the workshop. I placed Nathan's radio back on its shelf. His measuring tape went beside the workbench. Then I put his letter into my purse. Something had changed. Until that afternoon, I had been protecting myself quietly because Monica advised caution. Now I understood why I was doing it. This wasn't only about a deed. It wasn't even only about the house. It was about whether I still had the right to decide what happened to my own life. I loved Derrick. That had not changed. But love was no longer going to be the reason I surrendered. The following Monday morning, I began with my bank passwords, then my insurance, then my mailing preferences. One by one, I started taking back every small piece of authority I had casually allowed someone else to hold. And 3 days later, an email arrived from a realtor I had never met. The subject line contained my home address. What I read inside told me Derrick's plan was much bigger than I had imagined. By Monday morning, I had stopped thinking of what I was doing as secrecy. I was correcting mistakes. My first call was to the bank where I kept my primary checking and savings accounts. I changed my online password, updated my security questions, and asked the representative to verify every phone number and email address attached to my profile. Everything was still mine. That should have comforted me. Instead, I found myself wondering why I had waited so long to check. Next came my homeowner's insurance, then utilities, then the mailing preferences on several financial accounts. I requested paper statements for anything important and made sure they came directly to me. I also moved the original deed, Nathan's death certificate, my estate documents, and several other records into a safe deposit box. Derrick had never taken those documents. As far as I knew, he had never even searched for them. But I no longer wanted to rely on what I believed my son would never do. Monica helped me review my estate plan. I sat across from her as she went through each page. You don't have to change beneficiaries just because you're angry, she said. I'm not trying to punish Derrick. Good. I want to make sure nobody can confuse helping me with representing me, that we can fix. So we did. When I returned home, nothing looked different. That was almost surreal. Brianna was in the dining room working on her laptop. Zoe was doing homework. Derrick came home at 6, carrying takeout. He kissed my cheek. Hey, Mom. Hey. For a second, I wondered if I had imagined everything. Then Brianna said I found some beautiful cabinet samples for when we redo the kitchen. When, not if. I sat down at the table. What happened to the kitchen I already have? She laughed. Nothing. I'm thinking long term. Derrick glanced at her. Something passed between them. Quick, easy to miss. But I didn't miss much anymore. 3 days later, I was sitting at my desk upstairs when my computer chimed. An email. The sender's name meant nothing to me. Melissa Grant, the subject line did. Follow-up Thompson property valuation. I stared at it. For a moment, I wondered whether it was spam. Then I opened it. The first sentence made my heart begin to pound. Melissa thanked Derrick for speaking with her about the property. My property. She said she wanted to follow up with preliminary market information and confirm a few details before preparing a more formal comparative market analysis. I kept reading. The email wasn't addressed only to Derrick. My email address had been copied because, according to Melissa, it appeared in an older property contact record Derrick had provided. That mistake was the only reason I was seeing it. Then I reached the sentence that changed everything. She referenced a potential sale after title transfer. I read it again. Potential sale after title transfer. My hands went cold. For weeks I had focused on the deed. I had assumed Derrick wanted his name added because he believed it would make things easier after I died. That possibility had already been painful enough. But this wasn't about someday. This was about selling. I printed the email, then I called Monica. I think I know what Derrick planned to do. What happened? I read the relevant section. Monica was silent. Don't respond to the realtor yet, she said. Why? Because I want you to think before you act. He's trying to sell my house. He can't sell a property he doesn't own. That isn't the point. My voice rose. I know. No, Monica. He sat in my living room and tried to get me to sign away ownership. And now I find out he's already talking to a realtor, I understand. I stood and began pacing. This is the house Nathan and I paid for. Derrick watched us pay for it. He lived here. He knows what it means to me. I know. What kind of son does that Monica didn't answer? Maybe because there wasn't an answer that would help. After we hung up, I sat at my desk staring at the printed email. Then I heard voices downstairs. Derrick and Brianna. I walked toward the hallway but stopped before reaching the stairs. I thought you said we'd have a number by now, Brianna said. We will. When soon? We can't keep waiting, Derrick. Keep your voice down. I've been keeping my voice down for months. I stood perfectly still. Brianna continued, if we're going to do this, I need to know what we're actually working with. I said, I'll handle it. There it was, the phrase he used with me. Now he was using it with his wife. I returned to my room before they saw me. That night at dinner, I watched them differently. Derrick talked about work. Brianna complained about a client. Zoe told me about a science project. Normal conversation, normal family. But beneath the table, metaphorically speaking, my son was calculating the value of the roof above our heads. The next morning I called Melissa Grant. I didn't accuse her of anything. I simply introduced myself. I'm Layla Thompson. I believe you spoke with my son about my property. There was a pause. Oh, Mrs. Thompson, Ms. Thompson, of course, I'm sorry. What exactly did Derrick ask you? Her tone became cautious. He asked for general information about potential market value and what preparation might be needed for a future listing. Did he tell you he owns the house? He said there was a family title transfer being completed. I closed my eyes. Did he say I wanted to sell another pause? He gave me the impression the family had discussed it. That answer told me everything I needed. Thank you. Ms. Thompson, I hope I haven't. You haven't done anything wrong. I ended the call. For the first time, I allowed myself to say the truth out loud. My son intends to sell my house. The room seemed to absorb the words, but another question immediately followed. Why Derrick had financial problems. I knew that. But selling my home was not the solution to an ordinary setback. There had to be something he hadn't told me. That afternoon, Derrick came home early. He walked into the kitchen while I was making tea. Mom, can I ask you something? Sure. If you ever did decide to move, would you want something smaller? I slowly set down my spoon. Move where I don't know. Maybe a condo. Something easier to maintain. I looked directly at him. Are you trying to get rid of me, Derrick? He laughed. Too quickly. Come on, Mom, I'm asking. I'm thinking about your future. I nodded. My future. Exactly. He opened the refrigerator. You've got way more house than you need. I didn't answer because I finally understood something. Derrick wasn't planning for the day I died. He was planning for a future in which I was still very much alive. He just wasn't planning for me to be living here. And if I wanted to understand why, I needed to find out how desperate his financial situation had really become. Once I understood that Derrick was thinking about selling my house while I was still alive, I stopped asking myself whether I was overreacting. I started asking a simpler question: how much trouble was my son actually in? The answer came to me gradually. I didn't hire an investigator. I didn't search Derrick's bedroom or break into his computer. I simply stopped ignoring what was happening in front of me. The first clue appeared on the kitchen counter. Derrick had come home late from work and spent almost an hour at the dining table with a calculator, several envelopes, and a yellow legal pad. When he finished, he gathered everything quickly and went upstairs. Almost everything. One sheet remained beneath his coffee cup. I saw it the next morning. It wasn't a bank statement or anything private enough that I needed to open it. It was a handwritten list, credit card balances, a personal loan, a line labeled project loss, another labeled townhouse proceeds. Several numbers had been crossed out and rewritten. At the bottom, Derrick had written one figure and circled it twice. It was far larger than I had expected. I stood there staring at it until I heard footsteps upstairs. Then I stepped away. Derrick came into the kitchen. Morning. He noticed the paper immediately. For half a second, panic crossed his face. Then he picked it up and folded it. Work stuff. I looked at him. All right. He waited as though expecting another question. I didn't give him one. That seemed to make him more uncomfortable. A few days later, I heard Derrick and Brianna arguing upstairs. I wasn't trying to listen. I was carrying laundry down the hallway when Brianna's voice came through their bedroom door. We sold the townhouse, Derrick. Where did all that money go? I told you. You told me some of it. Lower your voice. Why, your mother already thinks we're broke. I stopped. Derrick said something too quietly for me to hear. Then Brianna answered. The studio was supposed to happen this year. It still can. With what money? Once the house situation is handled, we'll have options. My fingers tightened around the laundry basket. Brianna lowered her voice, but I caught enough. Equity, then Derrick. Not here. I walked away. That evening, I sat alone in Nathan's workshop. Piece by piece, the truth was becoming visible. The failed property investment had not merely cost Derrick some savings. He had borrowed. Then he had apparently used much of the townhouse proceeds to cover debts I hadn't known existed, and Brianna still expected to open the interior design studio she had talked about for years. Their recovery plan wasn't really a recovery plan. It depended on another source of money. My house. The next Sunday gave me the confirmation I hadn't wanted. Brianna had gone out with Zoe. I was in the laundry room when Derrick took a phone call in the kitchen. He wasn't whispering at first. No, I understand. Pause. I said I'm working on it. Another pause. The property has enough value. My heart began pounding. Then his voice dropped. No, the title isn't the problem. That's being handled. I closed my eyes. There it was. After the call ended, I waited before walking into the kitchen. Derrick was leaning against the counter, staring at his phone. Everything okay? He looked up. Yeah, you sounded stressed. Work. Another lie. He walked past me. I could have confronted him then. Instead, I let him go. Later that evening, Brianna came home in a terrible mood. She and Derrick began arguing in the living room while I was upstairs. At first, I couldn't make out the words. Then Brianna said loudly, You keep saying it's going to work out. It will. How I told you how. And what if your mother changes her mind? Silence. Then Derrick said the sentence I will probably remember for the rest of my life. It would be mine someday anyway. I froze. There are words that hurt because they're cruel. Those weren't cruel. That was what made them worse. Derrick sounded reasonable, almost offended that Brianna had questioned him. Brianna said, Someday isn't now. I know that. Then stop acting like this is guaranteed. She isn't going to need a house this size forever. My eyes burned. I quietly closed my bedroom door. I didn't want to hear anything else. I sat on the edge of my bed and looked at Nathan's photograph on the dresser. For months, I had tried to understand how my son could justify what he was doing. Now I knew. Derrick did not think he was stealing from me. In his mind, the house already belonged to his future. I was simply occupying it in the present. Maybe he imagined I would move into a condo and be perfectly comfortable. Maybe he believed he could pay off his debts, finance Brianna's studio, and somehow make sure I had enough left. Perhaps that was how he slept at night. He wasn't taking my home. He was reorganizing family assets. My professional life had taught me how dangerous people could become once they changed the language around what they were doing. Debt became leverage. Risk became opportunity. Taking became borrowing. And entitlement became inheritance. I thought back over Derrick's childhood. Had I caused this? Every time he struggled, had I stepped in too quickly? When he couldn't afford something in college, I sent money. When he and Brianna married Nathan and I helped with their first down payment. When Zoe was born, I paid for things they never asked me to pay for. After Nathan died, I had opened my home without hesitation. For a few painful minutes, I blamed myself. Then I stopped. Generosity may teach someone what you are willing to give. It does not teach them to deceive you. Derrick was 41. His choices belonged to him. My mistake wasn't loving him. My mistake was believing love required silence. The following morning, Derrick was making coffee when I entered the kitchen. Sleep okay, Mom? Fine. He handed me my favorite mug. For one ridiculous second, I wanted to grab him and ask where the little boy I raised had gone. Instead, I took the coffee. Thanks. He smiled. And I realized I still loved him exactly as much as I had before. That was the hardest part. Setting boundaries with someone you hate is easy. Setting them with someone whose baby pictures are still in your closet is something else entirely. But I had made my decision. I would give Derrick one opportunity to tell me the truth himself. One. If he admitted what he had done, we would still have a painful road ahead. If he continued lying, I would stop protecting him from the consequences. I didn't know then that time was already running out, because Brianna was about to make plans for my bedroom, and Zoe was about to repeat one sentence she had overheard that would finally tell me how close Derrick believed he was to getting me out of my own house. Brianna chose a Wednesday morning to tell me I had too much space. She didn't phrase it that way at first. People rarely begin with the sentence they actually mean. I was standing at the kitchen counter cutting strawberries when she walked in carrying her laptop and a small stack of fabric samples. "Layla, can I show you something I kept slicing? What is it, just an idea?" Those words had stopped sounding harmless months ago. She opened her laptop on the island. A floor plan appeared on the screen. I recognized my house immediately. What am I looking at? A possible layout. For what? She enlarged the image. If we eventually convert Nathan's workshop into my studio, I'd need better client access. But I was thinking we could also make the downstairs more practical. We already discussed the workshop. I know. I'm not saying we're doing anything tomorrow. She clicked again. Then I saw it. A bedroom downstairs. You could move here, she said. I stared at the screen. Excuse me? It makes sense. For whom? For you. She said it with complete confidence. No stairs. Easier access to the kitchen. We could even put in a walk-in shower eventually. I slowly set the knife down. Where did I say I wanted to move out of my bedroom? You didn't? Then why are you planning it? Brianna sighed. Layla, I'm trying to think ahead. About my life, about the whole family. There it was again. The whole family. A phrase that somehow always seemed to require me to surrender something. My bedroom is upstairs, I said. It has been upstairs for 32 years. I understand. Then we're done. She closed the laptop halfway. You have more space than you need. I looked at her. This time she didn't retreat. It's just practical, she continued. One person doesn't need the largest bedroom in a house this size. One person, not Layla, not Mom, not the woman who owned the house. One person. Before I could answer, Derrick walked in. What's going on? Brianna turned toward him. I'm trying to explain the downstairs bedroom idea. Derrick looked uncomfortable. I watched him carefully. You knew about this? It's just an idea, Mom. Your wife's idea involves moving me out of my bedroom. No one's moving you anywhere. Then why is my bedroom being discussed? Derrick rubbed his forehead. Because stairs aren't going to get easier as you get older. I almost laughed. I'm 69. I know. I walked 3 miles yesterday. That's not the point. It seems relevant. Brianna folded her arms. Why does every suggestion turn into a fight? I looked at her. Because suggestions usually involve asking the person affected before designing the rest of her life. Derrick's expression hardened. Mom, nobody is trying to take anything from you. The lie was so enormous that for a moment I couldn't speak. He knew about the deed, the realtor, the equity. He knew exactly what he was trying to take. But I had promised myself one opportunity. So I asked quietly, Is there anything you need to tell me? His face changed, only slightly. What do you mean exactly what I said? He glanced at Brianna, then back at me. No, that was his opportunity. He let it pass. I picked up the strawberries and carried them to the refrigerator. Then I don't want to hear another word about moving my bedroom. Neither of them answered. That afternoon I went into Nathan's workshop. The unfinished wooden airplane Zoe and I had found was sitting on the bench. I had bought fine sandpaper and a small bottle of wood glue so we could finish it together. That was where Zoe found me after school. Can we work on it homework first? I already did most of it on the bus. That sentence has never been trustworthy in the history of education. She laughed. For half an hour we worked quietly. Then Zoe became unusually serious. Grandma, yes, are you moving? My hand stopped. Why would you ask that? She shrugged, just wondering. I set the sandpaper down. Zoe. She avoided my eyes. Did somebody tell you I'm moving? No. Then what did you hear? She looked toward the workshop door. Mom and Dad were talking. When last night? I kept my voice calm. About what I don't know. That part I believed. They were arguing. Mom said something about needing to know before closing. My stomach tightened. Closing. Zoe nodded, and Dad said it would be fine. What else? She hesitated. Mom asked what would happen if you found out. The room seemed to shrink around me, and Dad said you wouldn't find out before closing. I felt my pulse in my throat. Zoe looked frightened by my silence. Did I do something wrong? No. I immediately reached for her hand. No, sweetheart. You didn't do anything wrong. Are you mad? Not at you. She stared at the wooden airplane. Then she whispered, I think Dad thinks you're moving. I squeezed her hand. Listen to me. You don't need to worry about any of this. But are you, am I, what moving? I looked around Nathan's workshop, at his tools, at the shelves he'd built, at the little airplane between us. No. The answer came easily. No, I'm not. Zoe smiled with visible relief. Okay. We went back to sanding, but my mind was no longer on the airplane. Closing. The word had a specific meaning in the world I had worked in for decades. Real estate sale, loan, refinancing, some kind of transaction. But Derrick didn't own my house. He couldn't legally sell it. He couldn't legitimately borrow against equity that wasn't his. So what exactly did he believe was approaching closing? After Zoe went upstairs, I called Monica. I told her what had happened. Not every word Zoe had overheard. I didn't want my granddaughter dragged deeper into adult problems, but I told Monica enough. There may be some kind of transaction being prepared, I said, based on the assumption that Derrick will have title. Monica was quiet. Then we need to determine what he's represented to other people. We can determine whether there are legitimate filings or inquiries connected to the property, and you already have the realtor email. I looked toward the door. I'm done waiting. I think that's reasonable. I gave him a chance today. What happened? I asked whether there was anything he needed to tell me, and he looked me in the eye and said no. Saying it aloud hurt more than I expected. Monica's voice softened. Then let's make sure you understand the full situation before you confront him. That evening, Derrick came home carrying groceries. He set a bag on the counter. I got that tea you like. I looked at him. Thank you. For years, gestures like that had been enough to convince me everything was okay. Now I understood that someone could remember your favorite tea while still making decisions that betrayed you. Love and wrongdoing could exist in the same person. That was what made family betrayal so painful. Before I went to bed, I passed the dining room. Brianna's laptop was open. The floor plan of my house was still on the screen. My upstairs bedroom had been relabeled. Guest suite. I stood there for several seconds, then I closed the laptop. The next morning, I was going to Monica's office, and this time we weren't going to discuss what Derrick might be planning. We were going to find out exactly what he had already promised using a house that had never belonged to him. Monica was already waiting for me when I arrived at her office the next morning. She had coffee on the conference table and a legal pad covered with notes. The moment I sat down, she said, "Before we do anything else, I want you to understand something." I waited. No one can legitimately close a sale of your house based on Derrick simply saying he expects to own it. I know. And no lender can treat him as the current owner when county records say otherwise. I know that too. Good. Because I don't want fear making this bigger than the facts. Nathan would have liked Monica. Facts first, fear second. So what did you find? She turned the legal pad toward herself. Enough to explain some of his behavior. My stomach tightened. Monica had helped me trace the situation through legitimate property and document inquiries, along with the information already in my possession. She had also reviewed the paperwork Derrick had given me more carefully. There is no recorded deed, she said, no lien created by Derrick, no completed loan against your property. Relief moved through me. Then she added, but Derrick appears to have been discussing financing with a private lender based on an expected transfer of ownership. I stared at her. Expected he represented that a family transfer was in process. I thought of the yellow sticky note, sign here. So he told somebody the house was going to become his. Yes. And they believed him. They appear to have been willing to discuss terms based on that future condition. Discussion isn't funding Layla. Without valid ownership, the transaction doesn't move forward the way Derrick apparently expected. I leaned back. That explained the word Zoe had overheard, closing. Derrick wasn't secretly selling a house he didn't own. He was building a financial plan around the assumption that he soon would own it. What did he promise them? From what we can reasonably determine, access to equity once the title issue was resolved. I laughed once. There was no humor in it. Title issue. Monica watched me. He was counting on my signature. Yes. And because he thought I signed the deed, he thinks it's only a matter of paperwork catching up. That would be my concern. I covered my face for a moment. Suddenly, every strange conversation made sense. Brianna measuring rooms. The realtor. Derrick asking whether I wanted a condo. The discussion about closing. The way he kept saying everything was being handled. My son had constructed an entire future on a signature he thought he had tricked me into giving him. What happens when the lender discovers he doesn't have the title? Whatever financing he expected from the property won't happen. And then that depends on Derrick's other debts. I looked at her. So this is where I rescue him again. Monica didn't answer. She didn't need to. That had been my pattern for years. Derrick fell. I reached down. Derrick struggled. I opened my wallet. Derrick needed somewhere to live. I opened my home. But this time he hadn't asked for help. He had decided what I should give him. That difference changed everything. I want them out. The words surprised even me. Monica didn't react immediately. Are you sure? No. That was the truth. But I think they need to leave anyway. She nodded. Those are two different things. I love my son, I know. And I don't want Zoe punished for any of this. She doesn't have to be. But I can't keep living with people who are planning around my property as though I'm already gone. Monica leaned forward. Then we established a formal boundary. We discussed the practical steps. No dramatic police arrival. No locks changed while they were at work. No revenge. They had been living in my home long enough that I wanted any move-out demand handled properly and with reasonable notice. Monica helped me prepare written notice consistent with the legal guidance she gave me. When the document was ready, she slid it across the table. Seeing Derrick's name on it made my chest hurt. Derrick Thompson, my baby, my only son. The person Nathan and I had brought home from the hospital wrapped in a blue blanket. Now I was holding a document telling him he needed to leave my house. I feel like I'm destroying my family. Monica shook her head. You didn't create this situation by discovering it. But handing him this will change everything. Things have already changed. That was difficult to accept. For months I had treated confrontation as the thing that might break us. But the break had happened earlier. Maybe when Derrick lied about Monica preparing the papers. Maybe when he contacted the realtor. Maybe when he started thinking of my home as his inheritance. My silence had only hidden the crack. I folded the notice and placed it in my purse. I want to give him one last chance. Monica's expression became cautious. You already asked him yesterday, I know. Layla. Not another week. Not another month. I looked at her. One conversation. I want him to sit across from me and tell me the truth without knowing how much I already know. And if he doesn't, then I give him this. Monica nodded. That's your decision. On the drive home, I practiced what I might say. Derrick, are you in financial trouble? Derrick, did you contact a lender? Derrick, why did you try to transfer my house? Every version sounded like an accusation. By the time I reached home, I had decided not to force the conversation immediately. Sunday dinner was 3 days away. We always ate together on Sundays. I would wait until then. That afternoon, Brianna was in Nathan's workshop again. This time she had sample boards leaning against the wall. I stood in the doorway. What are those? She turned. Just ideas. For my studio. I told you no. Brianna's mouth tightened. We can't keep preserving every room because you're afraid of change. This isn't about change, then what is it about ownership? She stared at me. For the first time I saw uncertainty in her face. But Derrick entered the garage before she could answer. What happened? Brianna pointed toward me. Your mother is starting this again. Derrick looked exhausted. Mom, can we please not do this today? I looked at both of them. Sunday. What we'll talk. Sunday. Something in my voice must have unsettled him. Talk about what? Everything. He watched me for several seconds, then forced a smile. Okay. That smile told me he still believed he was in control. Sunday arrived with rain tapping against the dining room windows. I roasted chicken, made potatoes. Zoe set the table. Brianna poured iced tea. For nearly 20 minutes, nobody mentioned the house. Then Brianna casually said she wanted to begin clearing Nathan's workshop the following week so she could get estimates for the renovation. I put down my fork. No. She stared at me. Excuse me, I said no. Derrick sighed. Mom. Brianna leaned back. We've already discussed this. No. You discussed it. I refused. Derrick's jaw tightened. Why do you have to fight Brianna on everything? I looked at my son. Because she doesn't get to decide what happens to my house. His expression changed. And then with the confidence of a man who believed the paperwork had already settled the question, Derrick leaned back in his chair. Mom, you need to understand something. Brianna went quiet. Brianna runs this house now. I looked at him. Then I slowly placed my fork beside my plate. The moment I had been waiting for had finally arrived. For a few seconds after Derrick said it, nobody moved. Brianna runs this house now. Rain tapped against the dining room windows. The refrigerator hummed in the kitchen. Somewhere upstairs, one of the old pipes made the familiar knocking sound Nathan had promised for 20 years he would eventually fix. Zoe stared down at her plate. Brianna sat across from me with one hand around her glass. And Derrick leaned back as though he had finally said something everyone else needed to accept. I looked at my son, then at his wife. I felt strangely calm, maybe because I had already cried, maybe because I had spent weeks discovering the truth one piece at a time, or maybe because there comes a point when humiliation stops making you smaller. It makes you stand up inside yourself. I placed my fork beside my plate. If Brianna runs this house now, Derrick, when exactly did I sign it over to either one of you? His smile disappeared. Not gradually. Instantly. Brianna turned toward him. What does she mean? Derrick looked at me. Mom, don't do this. Do what you know exactly what I'm talking about. No, apparently I don't. Brianna's eyes moved between us. Derrick. He ignored her. Mom, you signed the papers. There it was. The confirmation I had been waiting for. What papers? His voice hardened. The paperwork I gave you. The insurance forms. You know, there was more than insurance. Zoe looked up. I hated that she was sitting there. Zoe, I said gently, sweetheart, why don't you take your plate into the living room? But please. She looked at her father, then at me. Finally, she picked up her plate and left. I waited until I heard the television turn on. Then Brianna leaned toward Derrick. You told me she signed everything. She did. No, I said. I didn't. Derrick stared at me. Yes, you did. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. I stood and walked to the sideboard and picked up the folder I had placed there before dinner. I returned to the table. Derrick watched every movement. I sat down. The night you gave me that blue folder, I read every page. His face tightened. I signed the insurance authorization. I placed one document on the table. I signed the contact update, another page. I signed the forms I understood and agreed with. Then I looked directly at him. But I did not sign the deed. Brianna's mouth opened slightly. Derrick went pale. You're confused. No, Derrick. Mom, I spent more than 30 years reviewing mortgage and property documents. I know what you did for work. Apparently you forgot. He pushed his chair back slightly. That wasn't a deed. I held his gaze. Would you like to try that answer again? Silence. Brianna turned toward him. What is she talking about? He rubbed his forehead. It's complicated. No, I said. It's actually very simple. I reached into the folder. The document you slipped between ordinary paperwork contained language transferring an ownership interest in this property. Brianna looked stunned. You said Monica prepared it. Derrick's eyes snapped toward her. You knew that. Of course I knew. You told me your mother's attorney was handling the transfer. I felt something shift. Until that moment, I had assumed Brianna knew exactly how Derrick had tried to get my signature. Apparently she didn't. That didn't erase everything she had done. She had measured my bedroom, planned Nathan's workshop, discussed my house as though it belonged to her. But Derrick had lied to both of us. I reached for the final document. This is the current county property record. I placed it in the center of the table. Read the owner's name. Nobody moved. Go ahead. Brianna reached for it first. Her eyes scanned the page. Then she looked at Derrick. Layla Thompson. I nodded. Only Layla Thompson. Derrick stared at the paper. That doesn't mean anything. Recording can take time. I almost couldn't believe he was still trying. The transfer was never signed, Derrick. He looked at me. You intentionally removed the page, yes. You tricked me. For the first time that evening, anger surged through me. I tricked you. You let me think you'd signed it. I let you think I had read what you handed me. You knew what I was trying to do. No. My voice rose. I knew you lied about Monica preparing the documents. I knew you put a property transfer in a folder you described as insurance and estate paperwork. What I didn't know was how far you intended to go. His eyes shifted. That was enough. Brianna noticed too, how far she asked. Derrick said nothing. I turned toward her. Did Derrick tell you he contacted a realtor? Her face changed. Yes. At least we have one truth. She ignored the insult. He said it was preliminary. It was preliminary for a potential sale after title transfer. Brianna swallowed. That was the plan. The plan. She looked uncomfortable, eventually. I almost laughed. There was that word again. Eventually, according to whom Derrick interrupted. Mom, we were going to talk to you. When no answer. Before or after you sold my house, we weren't selling anything without making sure you were taken care of. I stared at him. You were planning where I would live. A smaller place would be easier. You were planning what would happen to my bedroom. That was Brianna. Brianna turned sharply. Don't put this on me. Their unity cracked right in front of me. Derrick looked at her. You were the one making renovation plans, because you told me the house was going to be ours. Silence. The words hung over the table. I looked at Derrick. Brianna did too. Then I asked quietly, "What exactly did you tell her?" He didn't answer. Brianna's voice trembled with anger. "You told me the transfer was basically done. I said it would be." "No, you said she agreed." Derrick pushed back from the table. "Can everybody stop acting like I committed some crime? I was trying to fix our situation. With my house," I said. With an asset that eventually he stopped. But I had already heard the rest of the sentence weeks earlier. "That eventually becomes yours." He looked at me. I nodded slowly. "I heard you say it." His face fell. Brianna stared at him. I continued. "You thought because you might inherit this house someday, you were entitled to use it today. That's not what I meant." "Then explain what you meant." He couldn't. I reached into my folder again. Derrick watched my hand. "I also know you've been discussing financing." His eyes widened. Brianna whispered, "What financing?" That question told me the next truth was going to hurt all of us. I placed my hand over the folded notice Monica had prepared. "That's what we're going to talk about now." For the first time since Derrick moved into my house, he wasn't telling me what would happen next. I was. Brianna was the first to break the silence. "What financing?" Derrick looked at her, then at me. His face had changed completely. The confidence that had carried him through dinner was gone. "It's not what she's making it sound like." I almost laughed. "What am I making it sound like, Derrick?" He pushed his chair back. "Like I was trying to steal your house. You put a deed in front of me without telling me what it was. I was trying to simplify things. You lied about Monica preparing it, because I knew you'd overreact." Brianna stared at him. "You told me Monica was handling the transfer. I thought she would eventually. That isn't what you said." Derrick turned toward her. "Whose side are you on?" Her face hardened. "Don't do that." I watched them and understood something painful. For months I had viewed Derrick and Brianna as a single force moving against me, but the truth was uglier. Brianna had participated in treating my home like hers. She had made plans for my rooms, my furniture, Nathan's workshop. But Derrick had built the foundation beneath her assumptions, and he had done it with lies. I looked at my son. "Tell her about the lender." Brianna went still. "What lender?" Derrick looked at me. "How do you know about that?" "That's your concern. You've been investigating me." "No. I've been protecting myself." He shook his head. "You set me up." That finally broke through my calm. "I set you up." My voice echoed through the dining room. "I read the papers you asked me to sign. That's your definition of being set up." Derrick said nothing. "I checked the ownership of my own home." "Is that setting you up, Mom?" "I spoke to my own attorney after you used her name to make a lie sound legitimate." His eyes dropped. "That isn't a trap, Derrick. That's what happens when someone discovers they're being deceived." Brianna folded her arms. "What lender?" Derrick rubbed both hands over his face. "A private lender. For what?" He hesitated. "Debt consolidation." Her expression changed. "How much debt, Brianna? How much?" I watched my son collapse under the weight of all the things he had tried to keep separate. Finally, he named a figure. Brianna's face drained. "No. It got worse after the project. You told me the townhouse covered most of it. It covered some. Some I was trying to fix it." She stood. "You lied to me too. I was trying to protect you." I almost flinched. Protect. Another word used to make control sound loving. Brianna paced toward the window, and the studio. Derrick didn't answer. She turned. "You told me we'd have enough for the studio." "We would have." How his eyes moved toward me. That was answer enough. Brianna stared at him. "The house." Derrick stood. "Once the title transferred, I could access enough equity to clean everything up. And then what? We'd stabilize. And Layla, we would have taken care of her." I felt something inside me go quiet. Taken care of. As if I were a problem to be budgeted around. Where? I asked. Derrick looked at me. "What? Where were you going to take care of me?" "We talked about a condo." "No. You and Brianna talked about a condo. Mom, a smaller place would be better for you. Stop telling me what would be better for me." My voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Derrick sat down again. "I was going to fix everything before you ever knew." There it was, the confession, not an apology, a justification. I leaned forward. "By selling the home your father and I spent 30 years paying for, I wasn't going to leave you with nothing." I stared at him. "You still don't understand. What do you want me to say?" "I want you to understand that it wasn't yours to use." His jaw tightened. "Eventually it would have come to me. Maybe." That word startled him. "Maybe, yes, Derrick. Maybe." He looked wounded. "You always said the house was for family." "It is. That doesn't mean you own it while I'm alive." I wasn't thinking like that. "Yes, you were." I held his gaze. You stopped seeing me as your mother who owns a home and started seeing me as the temporary person standing between you and an inheritance." His face crumpled slightly. For one moment I saw shame. Then Brianna spoke. "Layla, I need you to know something." I turned toward her. I knew Derrick wanted to use the equity. "I assumed you did, but I believed you'd agreed to transfer the house. I said nothing. He told me you wanted to simplify your estate and eventually move somewhere smaller. That explains what he told you. It doesn't explain what you did." Her eyes dropped. "You measured my bedroom. I know. You boxed Nathan's things. I know. You started calling rooms in my house yours." Brianna swallowed. I was wrong. It wasn't enough to erase anything. But it was the first honest sentence I'd heard from her that evening. I reached into my folder. The folded notice felt heavier than paper should. I placed it in front of Derrick. He looked down. "What is this written notice?" His eyes moved across the first lines, then back to me. "You're kicking us out. I'm requiring you to find another place to live within the time frame I've been legally advised to give you. Mom, I didn't want this. You can't be serious." I have never been more serious. What about Zoe? My heart twisted. "Do not use your daughter to make me surrender again." He went silent. "Zoe is my granddaughter. I love her. She will always be welcome in my life." Derrick stared at the notice. Dad would never have done this. The words hit me like a slap. For a second I couldn't breathe. Then I thought of Nathan's letter. Never surrender your security just because someone you love says they need it. I looked at my son. "Your father is exactly why I'm doing it." Derrick's eyes filled. So did mine. "I love you," I said, "but loving you doesn't mean letting you decide that my life belongs to your future." No one spoke. The rain had stopped outside. From the living room, I could hear Zoe laughing softly at something on television, unaware that the shape of her family had just changed. Derrick picked up the notice. For the first time since he had moved into my home, he had no argument left. And as painful as that silence was, I knew I could not rescue him from it. Not this time. The boxes returned to my hallway 2 weeks later. They looked almost exactly like the ones Derrick and Brianna had carried into my house years earlier. Brown cardboard, black marker, packing tape stretched across the tops. But there was no excitement this time, no jokes about 6 months, no promise that everyone would be back on their feet soon, just the quiet sound of a family leaving. Derrick barely spoke to me during those weeks. He wasn't openly cruel. That might have been easier. Instead, he became distant. He left early for work, came home late, and packed after dinner. Brianna was different. The morning after our confrontation, she found me alone in the kitchen. "I owe you an apology." I continued pouring my coffee. "Yes, you do." She seemed surprised by my answer. Maybe she expected me to make it easier for her. I wasn't going to. "I treated this house like it belonged to us. Yes, I believe Derrick had your agreement, I know, but that doesn't excuse everything." I looked at her then. "No," she nodded. "I know. That was enough for the moment." I didn't need Brianna begging for forgiveness. I needed her to understand the boundary. The hardest part was Zoe. She knew something serious had happened, although we tried not to involve her in the details. One Saturday afternoon, I found her sitting on the floor of Nathan's workshop with the unfinished wooden airplane in her lap. "We're taking my desk today," she said. I saw. "Our apartment is smaller." I sat beside her. "You'll make it home." She ran her finger along the wooden wing. "Dad says we won't live there forever." "That may be true." She was quiet. Then she asked the question I had been dreading. "Can I still come see you?" My heart cracked. I put my arm around her. "Zoe, look at me." She did. "This was never between you and me." Her eyes filled. "You're not mad at me, never." She leaned against me. "Mom and Dad fight a lot now." I kissed the top of her head. "Adults sometimes have problems they have to work through. Is it because of the house I chose my words carefully? It's because some adults forgot that loving each other doesn't mean they get to make every decision for each other." She thought about that. Then she nodded. "Can we still finish Grandpa's airplane? We absolutely can." On moving day, Derrick carried the last suitcase to the car. Brianna had already left with Zoe to begin unpacking the apartment. I stood on the porch. Derrick came back up the walkway. For a second I thought he might hug me. He didn't. That's everything. "All right." He looked past me into the house. "I never thought you'd actually make us leave." There was still accusation in his voice. "Not as much as before, but enough. I never thought you'd try to use my house to solve your debts." His eyes dropped. Fair. That one word told me something had started changing. Not enough, but something. "Take care of yourself," I said. He nodded. Then he walked away. I watched his car disappear at the end of the street. When I closed the front door, the silence hit me. For years after Nathan died, silence had frightened me. It meant absence. It meant grief. It meant another dinner alone. But standing in my hallway that afternoon, I realized this silence felt different. Nobody was moving my things. Nobody was planning my bedroom. Nobody was opening drawers and organizing my life. Nobody was deciding what would happen when everything became official. The silence belonged to me. I walked into the living room. The bookcase Nathan built was still there. That evening, I brought down the photographs Brianna had stored away. Our 25th anniversary, Derrick's graduation, Nathan holding baby Zoe. I didn't put everything back exactly as it had been. That surprised me. Brianna had been wrong to erase Nathan without asking me, but she had accidentally exposed something else. I had frozen parts of the house after he died, so I changed a few things myself. Not because someone told me to move on, because I was ready. Nathan's workshop stayed, but it stopped being a museum. Zoe and I finished the wooden airplane there. I donated tools I would never use and kept the ones that mattered. I even bought a new radio. Life returned to the room without Nathan being erased from it. Nearly 2 months passed before Derrick called. I saw his name on my phone and almost didn't answer. Then I did. "Hello, hey, Mom?" His voice sounded tired. "Hello, Derrick." There was an awkward pause. "How are you? I'm fine?" "Good." Another pause. I waited. Part of me expected the request. Money, help with rent, some emergency. Instead, he said I started financial counseling. I sat down. "You did, yeah." He gave a humorless laugh. "Turns out I'll figure it out isn't considered a financial strategy." I almost smiled. What else? I sold the SUV. That surprised me. Derrick loved that vehicle. We're cutting expenses. I'm working with the creditors. The investment debt is going to take time. And Brianna, she picked up more client work. He hesitated. "We're trying to fix things without somebody else's house." The sentence hurt and healed at the same time. "That's good, Mom." "Yes, I'm sorry." I closed my eyes. He continued. "I've said that in my head about 1,000 times. I just didn't know how to say it to you. You just did. I lied to you. Yes. I lied to Brianna. Yes. I kept telling myself I'd fix everything before anyone got hurt." I looked toward Nathan's photograph. But people were already getting hurt. I know, there was no defense attached to it. No but. That mattered. "I miss you," he said. "I miss you too. Does that mean we're okay?" "No." Silence. Then Derrick quietly said, "Okay, I love you, but trust doesn't come back because you apologized. It comes back because you change. I understand. I hope you do." For the first time, he didn't ask me to make the consequences smaller. "I'll keep working on it," he said. After we hung up, I cried, not because everything was fixed, it wasn't, but for the first time since that blue folder appeared on my coffee table. Derrick had taken responsibility for something without asking me to carry part of it. Over the months that followed, he kept calling. Sometimes we spoke for 5 minutes, sometimes 30. Zoe visited often. Brianna remained polite and careful. Nobody asked about the house. Nobody asked about inheritance. Nobody asked me to solve their debts. Slowly, I began to understand that forgiveness didn't require returning to the relationship we had before. Maybe the relationship we had before was part of the problem. What we needed was something new, something with love but also boundaries, something where my son could be my son without becoming my caretaker, my financial manager, or my future owner. I didn't know whether we would get there. But almost a year after Derrick left, I heard a knock on my front door. When I opened it, Derrick and Zoe were standing on the porch. Derrick didn't reach for the handle. He didn't step inside. He simply looked at me and asked 4 words I never expected to mean so much. "Can we come in? Can we come in?" For a moment, I simply stood there looking at my son. Derrick had lived in my house long enough to stop knocking. Toward the end, he had walked through my front door with the unconscious confidence of a man entering property he already considered partly his. Now he stood on Nathan's porch with one hand in his jacket pocket waiting. Beside him, Zoe grinned. "Grandma, are you going to make us stay out here?" I laughed. "Absolutely not." I opened the door wider. "Come in." Derrick stepped across the threshold. Something about that small movement touched me more than any apology he had given over the previous year. Because respect often returns quietly, not through speeches, through changed behavior. Almost a year had passed since Derrick and Brianna moved out. They were still living in the apartment. Their finances weren't magically repaired. Derrick was still paying down debt, but he had kept attending financial counseling. He sold the SUV cut expenses and stopped looking for shortcuts. Brianna had opened her studio too, not the large space she'd imagined financing with my home's equity. A modest one-room studio above a small commercial storefront. She paid for it through client work and savings. The first time she told me about it, she said something I hadn't expected. "It's smaller than I wanted." Then she smiled. "But it's mine." I understood exactly what she meant. Our relationship remained careful, civil, sometimes warm. I had forgiven her, but forgiveness didn't erase memory. She no longer offered unsolicited plans for my rooms. I no longer swallowed discomfort just to avoid tension. That Sunday, Brianna was meeting a client, so Derrick and Zoe had come alone. Zoe ran straight toward Nathan's workshop. "I want to show Dad the airplane. Go ahead." She disappeared down the hallway. Derrick stayed near the living room entrance. His eyes moved toward the bookcase. "You put the graduation picture back." "I did." He looked embarrassed. "I thought you might have thrown mine away. You're my son Derrick. I was angry with you. I didn't erase you." His eyes lowered. I deserved worse. Maybe. That surprised him. I smiled slightly. But revenge is expensive. It keeps charging interest long after everyone else has gone home. Derrick laughed quietly. "That sounds like something Dad would have said. Your father would have used more words. Definitely." We ate dinner at the same table where everything had exploded. For a while, the conversation stayed easy. Zoe talked about school. Derrick told me about work. I told them about a community literacy program I'd started volunteering with twice a week. That was another thing that had changed. After Derrick moved out, I stopped treating my house as the center of my entire life. I joined a walking group, started volunteering, took a weekend trip with 2 friends. I even repainted the downstairs bathroom a color Nathan would have hated. For years, I had thought preserving our life together was how I honored him. Eventually, I understood that Nathan had loved a living woman, not a museum curator. Halfway through dinner, Zoe left to answer a friend's call. Derrick and I were alone. He looked around the room. "It's different. Some things. It still feels like home." I waited. Then he said, "I've been thinking about something." "That usually gets you in trouble." He smiled. I probably earned that. Then his expression became serious. "I forgot this was your home before I started thinking of it as my inheritance." There it was, the truth stripped of every excuse. I placed my glass down. Why he stared at his hands, I don't know exactly. Try. He nodded slowly. "I think because you and Dad always helped me." I started believing family meant everything eventually flowed down to me, at some point. "Yeah, and then you got desperate. And some days started feeling close enough to use now." I appreciated that he didn't hide behind Brianna or the debt. I told myself I was protecting everybody, he continued, but really I was terrified I'd failed. You had failed. He looked up. I continued gently. "People fail, Derrick. The dangerous part was believing failure gave you permission to take control of somebody else's security." He nodded. "I know that now." I looked at him. "And I learned something too. What I forgot loving you didn't require me to disappear." His eyes filled. "Mom, I spent years making your problems smaller because I thought that's what good mothers did. You were a good mother, I was, and sometimes I helped too much." He smiled through his emotion. "Dad would have agreed. Your father did agree." I thought of Nathan's letter. I still kept it in the safe deposit box. After dinner, Derrick asked something I had wondered whether he would ever mention again. "What did you do with your estate plan?" I raised an eyebrow. He immediately laughed. "That sounded terrible. It certainly did. I don't mean what am I getting." "Good. I mean, did all of this make you change everything?" "Yes." His expression remained calm. I had worked with Monica to update my plan carefully. Not out of revenge. Not to punish Derrick. But to ensure my wishes were protected and nobody could treat my future assets as their present property. "I changed some things," I said, "but the details are mine while I'm alive." Derrick nodded. "That's fair. No argument. No wounded expression. Just acceptance. That was worth more to me than anything written in a will." Later we carried coffee onto the porch. Zoe sat beside me. Derrick stood near the railing Nathan had rebuilt decades earlier. The evening was warm. Cars passed beneath the maple trees. For the first time in years, I looked at my house without seeing conflict. It wasn't an inheritance. It wasn't equity. It wasn't a rescue plan. It wasn't even just a monument to Nathan. It was my home, and I was still here. I had once believed that saving my house meant defeating Derrick. I had been wrong. What I saved was my dignity. And by refusing to rescue my son from the consequences of his choices, I had forced him to become responsible for them. Our family never returned to what it had been. thank God. What we built afterward was better. There was love without ownership, help without control, forgiveness without surrender. As the sun dropped behind the trees, Zoe rested her head against my shoulder. I thought about the question that had wiped the smile from Derrick's face almost a year earlier. When exactly did I sign it over to either one of you? The answer had always been simple. I hadn't. But the deeper truth took me much longer to understand. I didn't have to sign away a deed to lose my place in my own life. All I had to do was keep surrendering small decisions until someone else believed they had the right to make the big ones. I wasn't doing that anymore. I was Layla Thompson. I was a mother, a grandmother, a widow, a woman with a future of her own. And loving my family no longer required handing them the keys to it. Looking back, I realized the most dangerous moment wasn't when Derrick tried to slip a deed into that folder. It happened much earlier. It happened every time someone said, "I'll handle it for you," and I ignored the uncomfortable feeling inside me. Every time I heard, "You don't need to worry about that," and allowed myself to be removed from another decision. Every time keeping peace became more important than protecting my boundaries. There is nothing wrong with helping your adult children. There is nothing wrong with generosity. But love does not create ownership. An inheritance belongs to the future. It is not permission to take from someone who is still living, still thinking, still choosing, and still building a life. I also learned that forgiveness and trust are not the same thing. I forgave Derrick because I didn't want bitterness living inside me, but trust returned slowly. It returned when he stopped making excuses, when he faced his debt, when he stopped asking me to save him, and strangely enough, when he stood outside my own front door and asked, "Can we come in?" Sometimes the most loving word a parent can say is no. No, you cannot decide for me. No, my sacrifice does not make you entitled to everything I have. No, loving you does not require me to disappear. And maybe the question we should ask isn't always, "Why are you doing this to me?" Sometimes it should be, "Who gave you the right to decide for me?" If your own son told you that his wife ran the house you had spent decades paying for, what would you have said? Would you have given Derrick another chance after what he did, or would that betrayal have been too much? Tell me in the comments. I truly want to know how you would have handled it. And if this story reminded you that boundaries can be an act of love, please like and subscribe for more stories about family betrayal, courage, and finding your way back to yourself.